I think there's probably just as much nervousness and anxiety around puberty for parents as there is for the girl herself. And there are lots of questions. Will my delightful, charming and loving daughter turn into a sullen and silent teenager? And where is my daughter going for her information? How can I make sure she comes to me? And what happens if I'm going through the menopause at the same time? It's an issue for every single girl and every single family in our schools. So I am thrilled that the GDST is offering us all this opportunity, and I'm also thrilled that Emma Gleadhill is here to guide us through it. She is a fantastic friend to the GDST and to my school, Croydon High in particular. We have really benefited from her ability to balance the parental, clinical and school viewpoints to reach the very best outcomes when it comes to placing a support structure around a pupil. She draws on 25 years worth of wide-ranging experience in education as a teacher, deputy head, professional coach, working with teenagers and families. And she also has a really useful blog that I would recommend you follow. It makes her the ideal person to talk to us on this particular topic. She has seen it all before. Frankly, she has blogged the handbook. So Emma, thank you so much for being here, and I'll hand over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that introduction. I do have a newsletter that comes out between weekly and fortnightly, which you can subscribe to via my website, which is just up on the screen at the bottom left. So we're thinking about supporting our daughters through puberty. I come to this really, I suppose, from many, many different directions, but one of the principal ones is that I'm a parent of an 11-year-old girl myself. So puberty has been in the air in our house for a few years already. And I would say that I've probably been preparing for puberty for really from the get-go. And that's something that I want to think about together tonight. It's wonderful that we've got so many of us joining together to think about this because, well, I think we're at a particularly difficult moment where we're thinking of the world as being quite a threatening and difficult place in all sorts of ways, and particularly with the news coverage at the moment about sexual violence and sexuality on the teen scene as well. But it's really important that we come to this from a point of purpose and love and empowerment rather than sort of from a threat-based centre. And that's why the newsletter that I write is called Parenting with Purpose, which has a kind of blend of my own experiences as a parent responding to the world as it unfolds around us in family life, as well as my work in schools as an education specialist looking at wellbeing, and my work as a professional coach. I am not a clinician. I did do the pre-clinical training to become a child and adolescent psychotherapist, and I will bring some of that element in tonight when we think about the social and emotional issues that are at stake. But without further ado, I want to get cracking really. And part of what I'm talking about is also going to be, I suppose, influenced by my experiences of working in safeguarding in schools, both as a pastoral deputy and as a governor. Parenting is like hitting a moving target, and we've got to be agile, especially so in the fast moving waters of puberty and adolescence. We need to be prepared to change to meet their rapidly changing needs over puberty and adolescence. But that change needs to be within a framework of values and purpose. And I would encourage you to think about the awareness we have of our own baggage, what we carry to this. What was our own experience of puberty? How were we prepared or not? How were we initiated into the world of our changing bodies and emerging sexuality? The world we grew up in is profoundly different from the world that our girls are growing up in. And so it's really important that we take care to parent around puberty by design, not by default. The world, particularly right now, feels complex and dangerous for our little girls and our bigger girls, especially in the awakening that we're having It's almost echoing and amplifying as a result of teenagers calling out behaviour that they're experiencing, as well as the recent disappearance, tragically, of the disappearance and death of a young woman in Clapham Common. We need to be careful that we're teaching our daughters about protection and prevention, of course, because we want to, our job is to keep them safe. We must be careful, though, that when we're teaching them to be safe, to protect themselves, we're not missing out in teaching her about what to say yes to and about enjoyment. Puberty is the gateway to, hopefully, a lifelong happy and healthy relationship with herself and also with others. And so when I look at this next slide, and my big coaching question to you is, what is it that you want for her? And when I look at this picture, which actually comes from the reception area of Emma Patterson's school, Croydon High, it's the most beautiful image of a girl owning her space, the boss of her body, looking out at the world with enthusiasm and openness. There she is. She's beautiful and imperfect. Those smiling eyes, that comfort in her own skin. It's amazing. But as we all know, the journey to get to that point is not always easy. So thinking about what we're bringing to this, rummage around for a moment in your own mind clutter. How do you feel about your child entering into puberty and embarking on adolescence? What is coming up there? Is there fear? Is there dread? Are we thinking of Harry Enfield's Kevin the teenager? Are we thinking even more darkly about we need to talk about Kevin? There's certainly in the air a sense of a beginning separation and an emerging independence. And this means gain and loss, both for our child and for us as well. And it's really important to disentangle the legacies of our own experience and be intentional about how we can show up around them and their experiences. So thinking about beginnings and endings, that dawning of our child's sexuality can really feel a little bit like the death of the child we had. And in the same way that when our babies learn to walk, they're suddenly they're not babies anymore, but toddlers. Fathers can especially feel a profound sense of loss and even grief when their little girl starts her periods. Equally, when those breasts begin to emerge and the breast buds begin to form, the free and easy cuddles that we once had suddenly start to feel a little bit more edgy and spiky and less comfortable. And therefore, we need to think about some of those unconscious aspects that come in here. How does it feel to parent a pubescent child or adolescent? It's a transition that can be destabilizing, not only for them, but for us. So it's a good exercise for us to check in with ourselves about what's going on for us emotionally around puberty, so that we can be really clear-sighted about what we want for her and how we're going to show up along the way. So when I'm looking at this image, when I'm thinking about this question to you, which is, what is it that you want for her? I'm looking at this idea of a young woman, a young girl moving into that womanhood who is going to be the boss of her body, comfortable in her own skin and her cultural identity, that she will be open and receptive, that she will be grounded in the values that we will have talked through numerous times throughout her life from an early age, that she will be able to celebrate this one body that she has, that she will be able to enjoy it and appreciate it, including her imperfections, that she will be able to name the parts of her body. This is part of this being the boss of your body. You can't be boss of something that you can't name. I want her to be able to name without fear or loathing the parts of her body. to get the medical attention she might need, and also to self-advocate for pleasure in wonderful, loving and intimate relationships in the future, whatever form those might take. Along the way, I'm going to be mentioning books that I think could be really helpful, and I'm going to mention one now. And this is a good one to read. We mentioned about the fact that many of us, like me, I had my baby late in life. I am perimenopausal, menopausal, and basically our changes don't just end at puberty. And there are renegotiations that need to happen around our body and how we feel about our body. So I want to recommend this book called Mind the Gap, The Truth About Desire and How to Future-Proof Your Sex Life by Kate Gurney. And the reason why I think it's brilliant is it talks about the history of how we've approached sex education, and it will help you inform how you might work back and look at the discussions you might have with your daughter. So that idea, I think, is quite an important one, that we can be an open, trusted resource, that we are the person that our child will turn to. Puberty and adolescence is not for wimps. It's quite difficult, isn't it? It's a time of anxiety, apprehension, expectation. There's a fear and thrill of the unknown. And physically, growth is happening more rapidly than at any other stage except in the womb. Well, I mean, the central preoccupation is to do with personal identity. Who am I? And from 10 plus, our children are in the process of becoming sexually, though not necessarily emotionally, adult. And that process of emotional and behavioural adjustment to the external and physical changes is what adolescence is. It can involve denial, dread, apprehension, relief, delight, hopefully. And often those feelings are mixed: pride and disgust, delight, excitement, and worry. And above all, self-consciousness. So how we show up around that as a really reliable resource is vital, I think. Thinking next about how we can navigate our path through puberty and adolescence. And, here, this is quite a challenging statement: get out of her way. Get out of her way. From 8 or 9 plus, there is a drive for mastery, autonomy, independence, agency, rightly so. So it's really important that we are ready to step back in order for her to step up, or potentially we will be watching her pushing back at us. So think about what you do for your daughters, and one of the things that you could do as a couple, as homework, with your parenting partner, or in your own mind, write a list of all of the things that you do for your daughter every week. Everything. And then start to think about which bits could she do herself, and cross those off the list. And start to work on a strategy to transfer that, so that she does a little bit more and you do a little bit of less for her. Think also about what nannies, au pairs, cleaners also might be doing. Cross off the things that they can do for themselves. There's an old Montessori edict: never do something for a child that they're capable of doing for themselves. It's important because actually they need to be able to see that they are not just a machine for providing trophies at school. And the parenting model I had from my mum gave up work to look after the 3 of us, and she felt very strongly that she wanted me and my sister and my brother to be able to have a free run at our academics and not be burdened by loads and loads of housework and what we call chores. However, I think there's something that's a different framework. I never call housework chores. I talk about teamwork. And it's important that from an early age, our little one has been able to play a part in the teamwork that runs the house. And she gets a great feeling of satisfaction and mastery from it. And this is a really important thing to build in. You all know that there's going to be a renegotiation of your attachments, and there will be some power struggles. We don't know what it's going to be yet. Will it be skirt length? Will it be veganism? Will it be activism? What's it going to be? But they need to have the experience and the exercise in developing their own agency and autonomy in order to feel engaged and motivated, self-driven. They need to know increasingly they have a seat at the adult table of life. And that can begin with, hoovering their own bedroom. There's a lot also to do with, for instance, consent around it. A while ago, the tsunami of toys coming into our house was becoming unmanageable, but rather than go behind my daughter's back and filter out stuff and, carefully take it to the charity shop, I worked at it with her consensually, going through all the toys together, making sure she was putting them in places where she could be, instead of asking me for where her stuff was, she would know where it was because she put it there. Again, sort of backing off being the person who's a go-to for everything. It's very easy to be like that. So we may think that doing stuff for her is sort of generously allowing her to focus on work, but that can backfire into a certain bit of learned helplessness and also fantasies on how they are valued. Whereas we are missing opportunities to be able to praise them and be appreciative of their contribution when they're cutting up vegetables alongside us. When I hoover our flat, I no longer hoover her room. She can do it. It doesn't take very long, and then I can thank her for doing it. And she can see that she's really a part of the family system, and she has got that agency. She's got that autonomy, and doing that from an early age, it means she's getting these life skills. And another book that I want to recommend is this one. It's called How to Be a Person by Catherine Newman. And it's quite exciting in a similar way that the brownies and the guides have loads of badges. We may not be part of that sort of culture, but it's really using parent relationship to motivate your child to develop their competency, their autonomy, and for it to be around, for all of that not to be just funneling around academics. And of course, with 11 plus, we will tend to focus on that sort of thing from year 5 onwards. So, actually taking a step back from that and involving them in family life, developing their chances to work on their agency is really, really good. So that can be a way of helping reduce some power struggles by actually getting a culture and an ethos of teamwork in the family. I'm going to talk about being compassionate and connected. We often forget, really. We think we remember what our teenage experience was like, but I'd put it to you that, although we acknowledge infantile amnesia, we often have an adolescent amnesia. We forget about the intensity of the experience of adolescence. And for many of us, aspects of puberty will have bypassed us, just how destabilizing that can be. I would say that, current thinking is adolescence is from 11 through to 26. It's a huge, long period of brain development, the slow growth of the prefrontal cortex, which involves a lot of reactivity and emotionality, especially where it comes to belonging and fitting in. And of course, so many messages that our children get about social acceptability and belonging stem from, idealized imagery about body language, our body shape, etc. And that's something that really needs to be brought into a framework. As I said before, puberty and adolescence isn't just a physical thing, it's an emotional navigation as well. Our factual explanations about adolescence tend to be a very different matter from the actual experience of bodily changes and the sexual feelings that start to occur. So we need to be realistic that there is going to be volatility. There will be pushbacks. That's actually part of that healthy individuation. But what really is important is that we stay connected, that we are able to be good listeners and responsive to the emotions that our children have, that we don't fall into the trap of minimizing their experiences or silver lining what's going on for them, or gaslighting even what they talk about as being part of their experience. Attuned parenting means that they can come to us with their feelings, their fears, their fantasies. They can talk about what's troubling them. They can ask us questions and know, even if their questions are quite cute, we're not going to laugh or belittle them. We will take them seriously. We will try our best to meet them where they're at emotionally by asking them questions that enable them to expand their exploration and their expression of some of the difficult and dark feelings that can be within. So being attentive parents, and like many of you, I'm a hard-pressed working parent, bloodied from the trenches of guided home learning and trying to work alongside a full house. But observant parenting means that we can really tune in and help our children shine a light on what's going on by giving them, certainly for bits of our time, some really quality focused attention, golden time, and that we are fundamentally curious about them. And we want to spend time with them. We show that we want to spend time with them, as Tracy Emin's lovely neon shows in King's Cross Station. That sense of separation and reconnection, that parental bond. Even when they're kicking us away, we want to be opening the doors and windows for communication, to be that trusted guide by the side. So, puberty, sex and sexuality. I think we need to reframe some of the approaches that have been prevalent concerning sex education. It's important that we do not just leave it to school to do the job for us. There is nowhere else where our children will get an idea about the values of loving and the truth about intimate relationships. And equally, really the idea of her having the information when she needs it is really important, rather than perhaps when the curriculum has decided that it's going to come into being. So when should we talk to them about puberty? When should we talk to them about their bodies? Really, the sooner the better. So if some of you are coming at this with 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds, brilliant. But there's always scope, no matter what age your daughter is on this journey through puberty and adolescence. We spend a lot of time really like aeroplanes on long distance flights, slightly off the flight plan. What matters is that we do lots of little course corrections. And what I want to say that's most important is, from the get-go, it's having lots and lots of little conversations about their bodies, about their feelings, about sex, about sexuality, right from the word go. Don't wait to be asked. The benefit of talking to them when they're young, from an early age, they are at that point closer to us, and we are aware of what's happening more closely. Come 8 or 9, puberty is already in the air and the gross factor kicks in. Come 11 plus, they will look at us and they will know that we're freaking out when we're talking about some of this stuff. So it's really important that we're able to give, factual, clear, and values connected information right from the get-go. It's empowering for them to have information before they need it. By secondary school, and frankly, by the time their peers start to have smartphones, all bets are off about what they're talking about and what they're sharing and seeing online. So, it's important that we are there to stave off misinformation, also excessive mystery and curiosity. Kids talk and they hear stuff. And we do not want Mr. Google to be their fact-checking friend. Back in my day, I remember the curiosity around sex and sexuality. But we didn't have Google to help us. We had to wait until it was covered in class, and different parents had very different approaches. But our kids can be a few clicks away from quite explicit material or quite problematic material that their hearts and minds are not ready for. So it's really important, if we want to model, enjoyment, appreciation of our bodies, proper knowledge, proper terminology, that our bodies are a source of joy, of power, of wonder, that our bodies are doing things perfectly naturally and perfectly well, then those are all quite important messages, and they're part of physical health and safety as well as emotional health and safety. So right from an early age, endorsing using the proper language, penis, vagina, urethra, vulva, so that they can name their parts without fear, without shame. It's like in Harry Potter, isn't it? Voldemort is that unnamed, that powerful unnamed thing. And in a way, our approach can be around female genitalia rather overly coy and unnameable and unmentionable. And I think that it's important that we are not like that, that we're not just talking about down there, but that we're quite upfront, and from a very early age, our kids understand and can name their parts. That education is really protective. It's going to help them with self-care, with better self-care. And certainly at the age of 5 and 6, there are lots of little girls who are becoming more independently responsible for their own self-care, who can't do it very well and end up with urinary infections, bladder infections around the age of starting school. So it is important that when we're teaching them intimate personal hygiene, that we are enabling them to talk about their genitalia accurately, factually, giving them the scientific names, not coy names. So thinking about what's going on, I'm going to do a quick trot through the sort of working back where puberty sort of starts. Puberty really has changed in the last 20, 30 years. The age of the onset of adolescence has come down from 14 to 10, meaning many girls are getting started around 8 years old with breast buds, for instance. So, what we're looking out for are the beginnings. The entree is stinky armpits, stinky feet. So actually we need to start upping our game from around 8+ with introducing some other aspects of personal hygiene to help them get into practice with it, to empower them to be good at it even before it's really needed. So for example, using deodorant. Obviously one doesn't want chemicals of potent deodorants to be used by very young children, but there are child-friendly versions. But it gets them into the routine of using using deodorant and cleaning properly. We also want to be thinking about hair washing, the onset of greasier hair as puberty hits and deepens, skincare, washing the face, a little bit of moisturising, looking after the skin. 8+, we're really on the track for getting breast buds and thinking about perhaps, once those breast buds appear, they can be a little bit tender, a little bit painful. And so maybe talking to her about it before it happens empowers her, so she hasn't suddenly got these lumps. There's so much around us to do with lumps being dangerous. So we don't want her to be, experiencing this on her own and worrying. Being able to empower her by enabling her to see it coming, to know what's happening, is great. One thing that worked really well with me and my daughter was, at the time when she was getting the breast buds, talking a lot about how it felt and what she was noticing in her movements. And we decided at that point to shop together for sports bras. The first bra, it can be a really fun thing, and it doesn't have to be a sort of sexualized aspect. It can be something quite fun, quite sporty, and that was something really uplifting and empowering. She knew that she could wear this and be comfortable wearing it. And at this point, she still goes to a mixed school. She was able to own these developments within herself and feel superbly comfortable and supported, literally and emotionally, because of it. 8 to 9+, thinking about pubic hair. And this is especially important if your daughter is on the ASD spectrum, because that sort of experience of the tactile aspect can be profoundly distressing. So again, being on the front foot, anticipating this natural growth and development, preparing her for it so that it's not like something that's awful, but it's something expected. It's the natural next stage. That from 10+, in particular, or depending on the entry level age of puberty, we need to be thinking about periods and making sure they are aware of what's going to happen, what periods are, and some ideas to think about being ready to talk about periods. It's hard to predict when they're going to happen. Often around 12 years old, plus or minus 3 years. So, they might be waiting for this, or it might come quite early. You don't know. But you don't want her to be waiting in fear that it might happen at any minute. So empower her. Make sure you look at ways in which she can know about it and expect it. Make sure that she can be prepared for it, that, for instance, in her bag, she's got a discreet and beautiful period product that she knows if something happens at school, she's got something to go for. Actually, the other day, my daughter and I shopped for period pants. She's way off it, but here we go. This is by an eco company called Modibody, who make beautiful stuff. And it's a far cry from the products that were around in my childhood, which were essentially like enormous nappies. So looking, for instance, at eco companies that have a wide spectrum of really interesting and great period products is, again, another way of empowering her, informing her, giving her choice, giving her agency around preparing and being ready. And hopefully also being able to be a good resource to other friends who may be, around this, encountering these changes too. I think it's important to think about when they're around about 100 pounds in weight. That's when, they're in the ballpark size-wise. And things to sort of say, practical things to say, is that their body is made to do this. Each month as she grows older, her uterus, the space in her body where one day a baby might grow if she chooses it, It develops a nutritious lining of tissue and blood builds up every month so that it can feed or nurture a developing fetus, a developing embryo. Most of the time a woman's not pregnant, so the lining needs to come out, and so the blood comes out and you bleed every month. But not like when you cut yourself. There may be period pain, which might not occur, might be mild, might be painful, and might well change over time. And of course, we often think, and I think probably girls will tend to prefer to have that sort of conversation with their mums. But for dads, I think it's really important that you are also involved in conversations about sex and sexuality, values, body shape, intimacy. Really, really important. And in fact, there's a lot of research from the States that tells us that actually the father's involvement in, that sort of both genders, the input, not only from a female perspective, but also from a compassionate, caring male perspective, is hugely helpful. It's hugely reassuring to know that different body types are also very attractive. It's also important actually in influencing girls to feel stronger about delaying their decisions to embark on sexual exploration. So it's really important that there isn't a total division between parenting couples, and also for single parents who are parenting alone, to think about trusted family, friends or relatives who might also be able to give that other view. Otherwise, there's a sort of sense that, what do boys get? A sort of veneer of this idea of what puberty is for boys. Oh, boys get erections and, oh, they grow balls. Girls get periods and period pain and have to mop up blood. It's really important that there is that sense of information that puberty is a really exciting and sometimes tricky and destabilizing, but actually a really empowering step on your way, natural steps on your way. And both genders have got their own difficulties and challenges. And so to see that kind of as a fellow human is really helpful and important. And yeah, I said before, we need to talk about sex. And of course, one of my daughter's favorite comedies is Miranda, and she always goes, X. And yeah, a kind of reframe to make sure that we're not being avoidant of these discussions, that we are empowering and we are talking about actually, our bodies are a source of enjoyment. They're part of what it means to be, and that enjoyment is part of what it means to be in a mutual, healthy and successful intimate relationship. We often talk about the 3 Ps, prevention, protection, but we must make sure that we also talk about pleasure with our daughters. And that's where this unnameable element can sort of increase that sort of sense of embarrassment or difficulty or awkwardness about having open conversations. Good consent comes from a point of really top quality information, and also a sense of being able to be authentic and articulate in talking about what you like, what's happening, what you want, what's good for you. And of course, what I look at this diagram, this book I really do like. It's not perfect, but it gives a really lovely overview of lots to do with puberty. So it's quite a good companion to this talk in a way. We'll all be familiar with the diagram here: fallopian tubes, uterus, cervix, ovary, vagina. We talk about the internal stuff, and that's definitely what will be covered in school. I remember, in biology, we segued from the flower, the stamen, and the bee into that kind of, cattle head diagram of the vagina, the uterus, the fallopian tubes. But actually, I think what we ought to be making sure we also talk about, and what we so frequently do not, is talk about the external parts of the female genitalia, so that they can look after it and keep it hygienic, and also that they can, own it and understand it. So yes, one of the beefs that I have about this I like this diagram. It's great because it shows all the parts very clearly. It's a shame that there's no pubic hair, because clearly that sort of colludes with the aesthetic that young people are growing up with, young girls are growing up with, that pubic hair is somehow shameful, unappealing, unattractive, and ought to be ripped out at the root. I do recommend a TED talk by Peggy Orenstein, where she talks about her experiences of researching young women's sexual experiences in US universities. And she talks about the pleasure gap between the way in which young men talk about sexual pleasure and the very low baselines that young women have in terms of their ability to self-advocate and get really quality early sexual experiences. And as I said, there's the need for us to talk about both elements, both what's happening with girls and what's happening with boys. Our culture has a lot of anxiety, and there will be anxiety among some of you, I imagine, about, well, if we talk about all of this, won't we be sexualizing them? Won't we be sexualizing them? And I suppose my short answer is no. We are living in a sexualized world with lots of, it's a commercialized commodity. There are lots of confusing messages coming at our girls all the time, that sexy equals powerful and valuable. However, sexual equals shameful. So what has happened in many different countries is the outcome of being well informed and proactively educated means that the reverse is true. Rather than being sexualized and making decisions and sexual exploration early, actually young people delay their sexual explorations, they delay the loss of their virginity, and they have fewer regrets around the decisions that they make concerning their early experiences. This is true in the Netherlands, also in Iceland, which used to have a very high prevalence of teenage pregnancy and STIs. They're in changing their approach to relationship and sex education, they have reversed that. There's also the differences are very clear in states in the US where there are these different approaches, a proactive, early, well-informed approach, and one that is more reticent and avoidant. We find in those cultures that teenagers wait longer, make better decisions, are more willing and able to get advice. They have fewer problems. They have fewer teen pregnancies and fewer STIs. So, we need to be mindful of this. The average age of puberty for girls, I said, is 10, older for boys. The average age they see porn online, boys and girls, is 10 years old, down from 11. By 14, 40% of children, teenagers, will see graphic images of other teens on phones by 14. So we need to work back from this and make sure that our conversations are talking about facts, proper names, no coyness, no avoidance, no embarrassment. We want them to be shame-free. We also, I think, need to be able to and willing to engage with the psychological aspects of puberty. So it's not all about those physical changes. It's also about our relationship. So that sense of acknowledging that there are these big feelings, mood swings, to be able to reassure them that that is actually quite natural and perfectly okay. It may be difficult to live with, but it's important that they realise that this is part of a stage they're in. I remember last year during lockdown, the school sending so many very rich and quite interesting resources on PSHE around puberty. And my daughter, even though I had felt I'd been really on the front foot with talking to her about all of these elements, she almost sobbed with relief at two things. When there was this reassurance that mood swings were okay, and also when there was reassurance that masturbation was a natural and healthy and an ordinary thing to do. In puberty and through puberty, they will need strategies in managing their mood, but they also need to have awareness that all of these hormonal changes will be triggering changes in their sense of desire and their awareness of sexuality. They will be experiencing feelings and fantasies, and their imagination maybe, and their dreams may be taken into some places that they might find quite disturbing. So they will be thinking about sex more, they will be feeling attraction, and that can be very unsettling. So again, empowering them by giving them more information a little bit before they need it around the sort of psychological aspects of puberty is really helpful. Being able to talk about it, being able to see that touching oneself, one's body is a source of pleasure, and it's a good thing to get to know her own body and what gives her pleasure. But there are boundaries there. Of course, it must be in private. It's a natural and healthy exploration, but it must be private and with clean hands. We must avoid shame. We must avoid aversion, prohibition, and humiliation around it. And we also need to think about body image and how we model that. A couple of years ago, taking my daughter for swimming lessons, we were goofing around in the changing rooms, and my daughter mentioned that I had an after wobble. Now, part of me, this was again a very teachable moment, part of me could have recoiled and said, oh, that's not a very kind thing to say. Part of me could have then talked about how I must do more exercise and firm myself up. But I kind of took a breath, a sharp intake of breath, and thought, nah, here's a moment where I need to actually pull up my big pants and show that I love my body despite its imperfection. And I remember, letting the goofing continue, but bringing in this idea of, yeah, my jelly, I love my jelly. And, that was so great because it was a real connecting moment when it could have been a disconnecting moment. And there'll be times throughout our daughters' puberty and adolescence where their bodies will be laying down and storing fat prior to a growth spurt. And therefore, we must be really careful that what we model around happiness, enjoyment of our body, enjoyment of food is not tainted by our own feelings that we must, I suppose, self-sculpt and tone up. That's our stuff. That's our stuff, and we need to keep that a little bit at a remove, because there is so much that they're immersed in that's telling them to be thin, to be this, to be that, and we've got to be careful. So being her primary resource is being that open, honest, reliable, trusted, consistent presence around some difficult topics, that we will listen to them, that she can come to us and feel that she is seen, that she is safe to ask no matter what, and that she can be soothed, her worries can be soothed by us. And in that way, we can keep our attachment and our connection to our growing tween and teen a secure attachment. When they feel safe, seen, that they can be soothed by us, they feel secure. So that's really important. Okay. I'm looking at the time and I'm going to pause for some questions. There's a lot more that I'd love to say, but maybe for another time. Emma, what's coming up from the Q&A that, what do you think? Because you're a parent of a 5-year-old.
I am a parent of a 5-year-old, and that was absolutely so insightful and really useful. There's lots of lovely commentary on the Q&A endorsing what you've said and thanking you for the frank and clear advice. I think we all agree with your statement that puberty is not for wimps. It's absolutely brilliant take home, and helping her become the boss of her body. I love the fact that you've given us some homework, and thank you so much for all the recommendations for reading and the websites. All the books that you've mentioned are in the chat. It was all really useful, thank you. And there have understandably been some really interesting questions. So to kick off, there's one around teens who mask their emotions, and in particular, do you have any advice for parenting autistic teens who are even more prone to kind of mask how they're feeling?
Yeah, this is difficult because one can't sort of shine a light in their face and say, you will talk to me. It's not it can't come from interrogation, but it does. What we can do is really make sure that we take time to be present and fully present. In other words, we often complain about our kids online, but that phone is not a barrier between us and them. That we give our attuned presence, and this means that we're giving quality eye contact, intermittent eye contact, because obviously that can be very intrusive. Also that we use various techniques, and I'm going to share a technique that's used by FBI hostage negotiators, which may be helpful when it comes to a reticent teen. When they do talk, whatever they do say, really focus on the last 3 words and maybe turn that into a question, or where you see an emotion come up. So something da la 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 la, I felt really annoyed. And so mirroring would be, you felt annoyed, which is basically saying, I'm listening to you, I'm with you, I'm hearing your words, but I want to know a bit more, or can you clarify? So it's really great technique for getting young people, as well as hostage takers, to open up and to develop that sort of sense of trust and psychological safety. We create psychological safety by giving real active listening and gentle questioning that's going to enable them to open up. Often when our kids use words about language, particularly teenagers, we've got actually a grand piano of emotions, grand piano. And when our kids were babies, when they were afraid, it was out there. When they were joyful, it was, and this because you have your baby in your arms and she'd go from falling apart and screaming in your face to gurgling with joy, right? Your teenager, though, sort of starts to go into a more safe zone, where things might be irritating or annoying. That's as much as they're going to admit to. So actually giving them more of an emotional range by not shying away from when they mention feelings, to actually help them label them a bit more accurately. Those are great ways of getting people to open up. Also, I would say this about your parenting, and this is again rather like that point about get out of her way. Watch out about how you model being judgmental. If you are a scary parent, you might be rather judgmental when stuff comes up. When they tell you stuff about what friends are doing, you might show fixed views and be judgmental. And I would say actually try and ask more than you tell. It's like playing poker, I reckon. So when they say something's gone on, there's some teenage crappy behaviour going on, ask them what they think about it. Say, well, what was the impact of that? What's important about that? What are you learning from that? What do you think? So instead of saying what you think, back away a little bit. because what you say about their friends or your sister-in-law or mother-in-law, if you're that cutting about them, well, what will you say about your teen when they mess up? Because they will. So backing off the judgmental stuff. If we're unforgiving and judgmental about other people's kids, we lose the opportunity to really talk with our child and gain their empathy. What do they, what do they think was going on? So working on developing their emotional literacy and their empathy and their understanding, their ability to kind of mentalize situations that may be happening. Why might someone be behaving in a mean way? Why might something have changed in their relationship group? So instead of leaping in with criticism, use that idea about curiosity as your superpower. Ask questions, open questions, questions that are powerful, which get them to reflect on what's going on. And then you can catch them doing right in their thinking. You can celebrate and appreciate what they say and what they think, and they feel connection. Absolutely. So those are some ideas, and certainly that's definitely what I work on all the time as a professional coach, both with parents and with teenagers. I hope that helped.
That's great. Thank you. Really, really useful response. Something which really resonated with me was the idea that you use proper language to talk about body parts. And there's a couple of questions on the chat around how do you do that when you haven't so far? I have a 5-year-old, as you said, and we don't use the proper words. How do I change that all of a sudden?
Anytime you like. Essentially, don't do it at the dinner table. That's going to go down a storm. By the way, did you know that your middle bum is actually your vagina? No, bath time, when you're in the bathroom together, when they're washing, or essentially, little anecdote, one proud moment of my parenting, my daughter in the 2 to 3's room at nursery really freaked out. One of the workers there who was about to go on maternity leave, they're having circle time to say goodbye, and my daughter pipes up with, you're going to have a baby. It's going to come out of your middle bottom, not your front bottom or your back bottom, your middle bottom. You're going to have to push quite hard and it might hurt. And obviously this went down in legend, but about the same time, because even babies at nursery, they know the score. They are fascinated about what's going on. And so giving them the facts earlier, they've got no inhibitions. We might think, oh my God, we're thinking about sex. And that brings up a whole suite of stuff for us. But for them, they're just curious. Tell them, and they'll go, oh. Or they might go, did you do that? And you go, yeah. Do you want to know anything else? Probably not. Yeah. But that's where you get into practice. And at any point you can maneuver away. I'd gone for front bum, middle bum, back bum at that point when she was really little. But, I then listened to a few more podcasts and read a few more books and thought, hang on, that's not quite right. And with my safeguarding hat on, you want unambiguous language around touch, around intimate care, what's going on. People who abuse young children or even older children, they are not going to go forward with a child who is clearly educated, who clearly has upfront conversations with their parents. So, their education is also a protection against the sort of, close encounters that you would really not want your child to have.
That's a really interesting reflection. There are a few questions on adolescent daughters who aren't keen to grow up, actually, who don't feel ready. And there's a really interesting question around a child who resolutely wants to stay asexual and rejects her body. Do you have any advice for parents experiencing that?
Meet her where she's at. Right? Meet her where she's at. and seek to understand what her fears and her worries are and be present to her fears and her worries. You know, I know that it's a really controversial and triggering and difficult thing to think that, you know, the baby that we grew, that we fantasized about her future, is really, in a way, rejecting part of the identity that we see as being hers. And actually, you know, this is a really important thing when it comes to gender questioning and gender identity. Same thing, you know, if they've got fears, meet them where they're at and show that they can still be seen, safe with you to share those fears, that they can be soothed. And by soothed, I don't mean that you minimize it and say, no, just look over there, you know, women's bodies are great, you know, we can't rat-a-tat them out of this. We've actually got to go through the tunnel of what their fear is with them. And if we don't give them the scope to explore and express and externalize more fully what is in their mind, then we're not going to be a presence for them. So again, work on psychological safety. Be curious and show that you are interested in what their fears and their misgivings are, that you will let them express that to you and you will stay present. It might distress you, it might freak you out, but it is important that you are there for them. And if they are saying, I don't want to be you know, I don't want to be a she, or I want to change my name, again, staying with them where they're at. It doesn't mean you're saying yes to a whole suite of, you know, irreversible changes. It means you're staying with them. One of the key reasons why children gender or have gender dysmorphia or gender identity problems or transgender are some of the most psychologically vulnerable children, is because it is that severance, that they feel that they are no longer seen by the people who are their primary caregivers. Mm. So, you know, it may be a phase, it may not be a phase, but you know, you don't want your child to have suicidal ideation or self-harm on top of the worry that you already have about them rejecting their gender. So I would say, be patient. Adolescence and, you know, puberty is often about 5 years. Sometimes it's 1 year. You know, it can be rapid, it can be slow. Adolescence is a really long job, but what superbly helps is that attuned presence and working on keeping secure attachments. And I would say Dan Siegel's books are really helpful, not necessarily on the gender front, but on the attachment theory idea. So there's a book called The Power of Showing Up, and also Parenting from the Inside Out, because of course, you know, this can bring up all sorts of trauma within us. And that sort of idea that I said before about do the me search, you know, what's coming up for you about your child's adolescence, your child's puberty. You may have had a really difficult time in puberty yourself, but your child's experience is going to be unique and different. I hope that helps.
Really interesting. I'm going to have to listen to this talk over again and make all my own notes. That's absolutely fascinating. There's a really interesting question, which I'd really like to hear your views on, around porn and how you protect your daughters and I suppose to some extent sons as well from porn when it's so prevalent and so easily findable, without being overbearing and controlling and too dictatorial about it.
Right. No, great. Great. I think you need the porn conversation quite early. I think you need to be talking about sex for enjoyment quite early, you know, like 8, 9+, because of all these sexual aspects that are in the air anyway. You know, essentially, the minute your child starts talking to you about getting a phone is the time when you've got to talk about, you know, especially if you're thinking about smartphones. And of course, you know, we are all in reasonably moneyed backgrounds. We may have different approaches to this, but there will be kids in the class who will be getting these things immediately. Immediately they ask for them, or, you know, I think we've got to be on the front foot with this and warn our kids that smartphones are amazing. They're great. They are powerful tools, but that we can find out loads of stuff that's really good, but we can find out stuff that can be quite shocking and difficult. And that, that's a thing to think about. So I'm going to just do a little riff on this. So porn and smartphones, curiosity about sexuality, it's in the air. If you've got 4G and you've got a phone, no matter where you are, you can, the world is your oyster. And the sorts of things you're going to source are not going to be industry standard, because there are, restrictions on access, industry standard porn. So the sort of stuff that they're going to see is, ropey. But it's a big part of our culture, which is where this question is coming for. We need to talk to them before this. The average age kids see porn, I said, is 10, down from 11. And often they see it accidentally, but sometimes not. So, for example, if we're going to talk to them about it so that they know about it and they're empowered before they're dealing with it on the hoof, for instance, we might say, sometimes people will look at or see people naked on a screen. This is really difficult for your heart and mind. This is definitely something for adults. It is definitely not okay for kids to look at this. And that's drawing boundaries. But equally, I'll be doing the same from a really early age in talking about the word sexy. That, the word sexy is definitely an adult thing. It's not for kids, and people shouldn't be telling kids that they're sexy. And of course, they're listening to songs, they're singing songs with, I remember when I was doing my teacher training, being on a coach with a load of primary school kids aged about 8, and they were singing along to a Samantha Fox song, going, touch me, I want to feel your body next to mine. And I'm freaking out. But of course, it means very little to them. They're just, but when we're in the car, in the radio's on, and these words come up, we can actually start to talk about sexy and put some values and boundaries around what it is. You see little tops, croppy tops for girls, saying sexy and saying why that's not appropriate. Anyway, going back to porn, for 8 or 9-year-olds, or on the threshold of smartphones, some people look at videos of people having sex online. This is called pornography. Again, we're using proper language and we're being really factual. It's not okay for kids your age to see this stuff. It is definitely not something that you should be seeking out. Your heart and mind are just not ready to handle it. Sex is not for kids, and it can be pretty disturbing to see if you're not ready for it. Once you see something like this, you cannot unsee it. So what one person might laugh at or find exciting, another person might find disturbing. So if you do find something like this online, you know that you should come and talk to me about it. These things happen. The important thing is that you deal with it, and we want to be there to help you, whatever happens. If someone wants to show you something like this, you need to come and tell me, because of course that is safeguarding. So, coach them in strategies. If someone wants to show them something, lying is okay. If someone else wants to show you something that you don't want to see, just say, yeah, been there, done that, seen that sort of stuff. I'm not really into it. And of course, online activity has a lasting impact. So, there are loads of messages around nudity online, this idea of sharing graphic images around the age of 14 and 14 plus, the sort of sexting statistic I mentioned, that doesn't come out of a vacuum. Again, it's about boundaries, privacy. And here I'm going to be controversial. I'm going to say, what about your own social media stuff? What about your own social media? Do you ask your child's consent before you post their picture online? Because the average child has had hundreds and hundreds of images of them posted online. Think very carefully before you publish something online that is a little bit humiliating, or it might be funny, it might be cute, but actually the act of you publishing it online is sort of giving the green light to consenting or not seeking consent, that it's okay to publish something edgy for a laugh. And this is what schools are picking up on with cyberbullying and cyber incidents and sexting problems. So we need to do our own due diligence. I blog about my work. I blog about family life. Never mention my daughter's name. I always vet what I'm, if it's something about her direct experience, she looks at it before it goes online and okays it. And similarly on Facebook, my Facebook is totally open. And that means I don't have loads of privacy stuff, but it means I am really disciplined, and I teach her to be really disciplined around whatever I post is completely public territory. So again, I would never post a picture of her where her face is seen. It might be a picture of her in the distance, but it's it's her childhood, it's her privacy. So those are some thoughts around porn, online safety, the whole 9 yards. So I know we're kind of running out of time. My daughter's cooking a steak for me tonight. So, I'm due in the dining room in a moment.
Well, thank you so much. That was absolutely fascinating and really, really useful. And I know those watching will have felt exactly the same. I'm really sorry we didn't get to cover anything like all of the questions that were on the Q&A, but thank you very much to those of you who did.
Could I just remind everyone that if you're interested in more thinking like this or being in touch with my work, you can subscribe to my Parenting with Purpose newsletter, which is weekly to fortnightly. There's no hard selling marketing stuff to do with it, really. It's practical tips following very much my approach today on all sorts of parenting topics. You can subscribe absolutely for free via the homepage of my website, emmagleadhill.com, and you can unsubscribe at any point when you feel your inbox is just getting way too cluttered. But I know that can be quite helpful. It's great to have seen so many of you tonight.
Emma, thank you very, very much.
Take care.
The next of the GDST talks is on Wednesday, the 24th of March at 6 p.m. It's the Psychology of Sleep with Dr. Sinead Devine-French from the Positive Project. On the 29th of April, we have Navigating Female Friendships with Andrew Hampton, founder of wellbeing organisation Girls on Board. So please do look out for the talks that are coming up, and we hope to see you there. For more information on any of these, please contact your child's school. You should also know the recording of this will be available as soon as possible. We'll share it with you when it's available. Please feel free to share it with your friends and family, anyone who you think would find this gold dust advice useful. And we'd also love to hear your feedback. So please feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments here and also in the feedback questionnaire that we will share with you at the same time as the recording. But it remains for me to say thank you so much for joining us. And Emma, thank you again for your time and your real expertise. Thank you very much. Good night, everyone.
Good night.